and be forgiving. This is the first time we've done something like this, so it's a prototype. We will value your feedback. At the end of the event, Kit will be sending out some forms. Give us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Put it together, give us it all. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, please join us for Court Chaos as I hand over to David Sexton. Over to you, sir.
You're muted.
Sorry. All rise for the Honourable Justice Sloyan. Be seated.
Thank you, my learned colleague. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, thank you for your attendance today. Now that you've been sworn in, let me explain your duty. Firstly, you should be aware of the case about to be presented to you and have had the opportunity to read the public account of the preceding events in order to familiarise yourselves with the grave allegations against the defendant. If you have not yet had the opportunity to do so, I would recommend that you quickly revise the contents now. Secondly, you have been called here today to render a verdict on the case of the defendant, Lord Fabio De Sio, versus Her Majesty's Crown Prosecution Service. Your role in your capacity as acting jury members is to help administer justice, and my role as presiding judge is to ensure that the case proceeds in a fair and balanced manner that facilitates the establishment of the truth or the closest possible approximation of it. You, the jury, will weigh the evidence and determine for yourselves the most important points. The law demands that there was both a means, that is to say, a how, and a motive, that is to say, a why, with which to complete the murder. The defendant is innocent until proven guilty, and you are reminded that these two conditions of the applicable law must be met in order to justify a guilty verdict. Should you arrive upon the conclusion of reasonable doubt, then you are obliged by the court to vote for the defendant's innocence. If, however, you are compelled by the arguments presented by the prosecution and are satisfied that the evidence is exacting, then you are obliged by the court to vote guilty. Counsels and witnesses, you have sworn to deliver the truth, to exercise your roles to the best of your abilities, and to conduct yourself in a professional manner. Your understanding is assumed that any instances of foul play or unprofessional behaviour will have consequences. The event will proceed as follows. In the first section, the prosecution counsel will be invited to make their case, after which the court will adjourn for a short intermission, and upon return, the court will then hear the defence's case, after which we'll adjourn once more, to be followed finally by a summary of the evidence and the sentencing of the defendant. I'm now satisfied that I've covered all of the essentials and that all parties should be quite clear on the proceedings, the agenda, their expectations, and their duties. My learned colleague, have I missed any points that might require further clarification?
No, Your Honour.
Thank you, my learned colleague. I now conclude my overview of the proceedings and invite you to present to the court the agreed facts of the case.
Thank you, Your Honour. You, the jury, have been summoned to the trial of Lord Fabio De Sio for the premeditated murder in the first degree of Doria Peri. Both sides have submitted their evidence, witnesses and timelines to the court, and both agree that on the morning of the 23rd of February 2016, at approximately 20 to 1 a.m., the arresting officer, Detective Roseblade, arrived on the estate of Lord De Sio, where a party had been in progress. He went on to be shown the body of Doria Peri in a state of advanced rigor mortis, and the body was also in a state of severe contriction. Both sides agree that Miss Peri was alive at the start of the defendant's party, and that Lord De Sio spent the majority of the evening in one-on-one discussions with her. He was also present during her death. Multiple witnesses confirm that the defendant and Miss Peri had been in a jovial discussion at the start of the evening. However, 6 witnesses report on various occasions throughout the night that the conversation's tone had changed, describing the conversation as more somber, and that both the defendant and Miss Paris expressed their displeasure shortly before the time of her death. The estate is old and extends across 1.5 acres. A full forensic search was initiated, but nothing linking the cause of death to the defendant was discovered, and both the guests and the defendant were subjected to intensive strip and cavity search. Again, nothing of note was found. Toxicology showed that Miss Paris had slightly increased levels of cholesterol, mild arterial calcification, and 1.2 units of blood alcohol in her blood, and raised biomarkers were discovered, which usually indicate inflammation and free phosphates attributed to cardiac arrest. But heart failure was not the primary cause of death, but a secondary effect. No ligature marks, puncture wounds, or other signs of injury were found on the body, and the coroner's report concluded that the cause of death was stroke followed by multiple organ failure, and observed that the facial disfiguration was consistent with hemifacial microsomia, a rare disease associated with the Swiss aristocracy. However, the progression of this disease is not typically consistent with the timeline in this case. This particular presentation would have been silent for years and only manifested late in adult life. Moreover, Miss Paris has had no family history to indicate this disease, and all of her siblings and descendants are, to all intents and purposes, healthy. The prosecution alleges that Doria was murdered using a bioweapon, and as such, the prosecution will argue that the defendant is guilty of murder in the first degree. The defense contests this conclusion and believes the death is attributable to natural causes.
Thank you once again, my learned colleague. As we now enter into the proceedings, the court takes the opportunity to remind counsel of the obligation to conduct themselves professionally and in accordance with bar rules and regulations and the expectations placed upon them under the eyes of the law. Counsel, your compliance is assumed, and we will now commence proceedings. I would now like to invite the prosecution counsel to begin their case. Counsel Jones, you may commence in your own time.
Thank you very much, Your Honour. Members of the jury, we, the prosecution, shall prove beyond all reasonable doubt the unequivocal guilt of Lord Desir. We will map out the precipitating events that led to the untimely demise of Ms. Doria Paris, expounding the calculated motivation and bone-chilling manner with which her murder had. You shall wait, qualify, and agree with our evidence that it is too implausible that the defendant could have not been motivated to silence Ms. Paris. The defendant's need to preserve his future through eliminating his past was too strong. One last end needed to be tied up, and in perfect manner. Lord Desir will present himself as an innocent bystander, bereft of justice because of his wealth and connections, merely a target for the common man, motivated by greed and envy, driven by insecurity and feeble-mindedness. The defense would have you believe that a tenuous connection existed between the defendant and the victim, and that the time spent crossing paths was just businesslike, matter-of-fact, trivial, spinning these encounters to downplay the undertones where a connection was very much well established. This will not work on you, for you will know this and you will dismiss these techniques. The defense will seek to polarize and manipulate you into thinking that the victim died of a rare disease, hemifacial microsomia, so rare that it does not even exist in the ethnicity of the victim, so rare that it is not even the coroner doubted its existence, so rare that we will present evidence and witnesses to attest that it must have been a bioweapon, molecular assassination. Between the 22nd and 23rd of February 2016, at the Buckinghamshire home of Lord Fabio Desir, we bore witness to a new type of murder where orchestrated execution was exact, as if the defendant had done it all before. Miss Paris was a dead woman before she even attended the party. A plan most cunning, depraved genius of a mind most foul, already in action. The party served to remove all traces of delivery. This genetic sweeping actively removed most evidence, leaving only the horrifying expression of our victim. Seared in the memories of those that had seen the body, what could have motivated someone into such desperation? What revelation meant that they would have to kill? And kill again. Our timeline, corroborated by the arresting officer, will testify that the defendant has intimate links to South America, Ministry of Defense, Swiss Insurance Group, and various genetic and genomic laboratories around the world. Indeed, in this country's own House of Lords, each is a significant link in the great chain of the story, and whose testimony will unravel the complexity of the why to provide verification to the extent of Lord Desir's vast, dark web. His claims to aristocracy are as empty as his soul. All to preserve a lie and maintain a lifestyle, no matter the cost, be it human lives or ethical morality. We will show no less that Lord Desir is a fraud. His need to silence the victim because of the ties to the defendant and the knowledge of his horrendous, psychotic, and devious nature, culminating in illegal human experimentation. She had to go. The death of the victim raised no emotion in the defendant because he knew precisely what he was doing at every juncture, at every interaction. A symphony of killing with a crescendo of cold-blooded murder. In rapid and deadly succession, he incapacitated his victim so vehemently that Miss Doria Paris could not even react. Her fight and flight components were neutralized. Imagine the terror, knowing that death was in motion and you could not react. The scientific evidence will prove that Lord Desir has access to highly secretive and exclusive knowledge. His skills, exploitation of intimate links to world-class research and institutions in genetics and genomics directly correlate to the learning he achieved from his biological father, the final human connection in this vast saga. This was none other than the infamous Nazi officer, the SS Joseph Mengele, the angel of death. Despite the defendant's mother, Madame Maddie Depury, attempting to entrain her son away from any path that might expose the ties, the lies, and alibis, it would appear that he has inherited his father's evil. And as they say, evil begets evil. The apple appears to have fallen far closer to the tree than Madame Depury is willing to recognize or reconcile. This instinctual and barbaric need to eliminate any threat to their status quo, their forks aristocracy, and hide any illegal human testing has demonstrated a new chilling type of danger, murder. And murder most precise, intimate, and nearly impossible to trace is now entering our lives. Do your duty, jury. You must convict this molecular assassin for justice today, for justice tomorrow, and for justice for all those who have lost their hands and lives at these malevolent inventions of doom. Your gracious honour.
Thank you, my learned friend, for your statement. I now invite the defence counsel to state their case. Counsel Hager, you may commence in your own time.
Thank you very much, my lord. I'd just like to say I have listened to what the prosecution case is. And the fact is that when it comes to many of the facts, we actually agree with a lot of what they are saying. But there is a big difference. They tell a story of murder and mystery, of people locked in history and hatred and greed. And they have concocted a narrative that they say explains the death, the tragic death of the victim. I've listened very carefully to what Counsel Jones has said. He says it's too implausible that the defendant was not motivated to murder. Now, there's a few double negatives in there. I can't quite understand how that logic works, but we'll come to that. That he was motivated by greed and envy. That we're going to claim that there was a tenuous connection between the victim and the defendant, that it must have been a bioweapon. They've got a lot to prove here. And then his rhetoric got a bit ahead of him. I'm sorry, Counsel Jones, but a mind most foul, his claims to aristocracy as empty as his soul, and that this will all be proved by scientific evidence. But ladies and gentlemen of the jury, there are a few points that I think it is important that you remember. Firstly, it is not up to me and my team, to my defense team, to explain what happened here. It is for the prosecution to prove it. Secondly, there is not a shred of real evidence in anything they say that proves the guilt of the defendant. It is a mystery to me that the case has got as far as it has, to be frank, and there are many people behind this with a vested interest going back into history, and there are many shady histories that lie behind this, but none of this has got anything to do with the guilt of the defendant. In fact, there are a huge number of red herrings here that will be presented. And please, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in the name of justice and for the sake of history, because this case does have huge historical significance, please stay focused on what is true and what is proven. Because the aim of the prosecution is to mislead you. Please ignore their conjecture, ignore their speculation, ignore what is made up on the back of a fag packet, to get colloquial about it. We will explain what really happened. We will explain the real relationship between the victim and the defendant. And I'm going to start by telling you that the defendant, Lord Fabio de Sire, is the son of Joseph Mengele. I'm also going to tell you, and we will show irrefutable evidence, that the defendant did know the victim. In fact, he knew her very well. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Lord Fabio de Sire is the victim's uncle. The victim is the daughter of Stefan Gerhardt, who we will tell you about. He is the twin brother of Lord Fabio de Sire, utterly unknown to Lord Fabio de Sire until very late, much later on in life. The victim and the defendant are not shrouded in evil and dreadful people who've inherited all this terribleness from his father. They are in fact very good people, people who are working together to try to put right the wrongs of the past. And we will produce irrefutable evidence, and that will be the only place you find irrefutable evidence through this court case. What you will hear is not a tale of hate, but a tale of redemption from the ashes of history, from the hell of the Holocaust to the present day in this courtroom. And I've got to say something very personal here to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that my own past is tied up in this story. My own family were victims of the Nazis. For many years, I have been involved in tracking down those responsible, but I became disillusioned with what I found. And I was on the verge of leaving the legal profession until this case. This case is so powerful that it brought me back into the courtroom, back to represent the relatives of the people that I have fought all my life. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is a beautiful and tragic story. This is a story about good people facing trauma and loss. The defendant sat there and watched his niece die in front of him. And you will realize when you hear the evidence just how affecting that was to him, because it had happened to members of his own family, his own children, as you will hear. Please listen to the facts. You have the power to stop this tragedy becoming even worse. I fully believe, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that when you are confronted with the facts, you too will wonder why this case came to this court at all. And I believe absolutely that you will free the defendant, and you will know that of all of the people, he is probably the biggest victim in this case. Thank you, my lord.
Thank you, my learned friend, for your statement. I will now be handing over the running of the proceedings to my learned colleague, the court usher. In my own capacity as court justice, I will continue to monitor the proceedings as the prosecution makes their case. Counsel, you may commence in your own time.
Thank you, Your Honour. If it pleases the court, I should seek to call the arresting officer, Detective Chief Superintendent Matt Roseblade, to the stand for his testimony. Can you confirm your name and credentials?
Your Honour, I'm DCS Matt Roseblade at the Buckinghamshire CID, 25 years on the force.
Thank you. On the 23rd of February 2016, at 41 minutes past the hour of midnight, you arrived to a rather unusual situation at the estate of the defendant. In your own words, can you report the state that you found the defendant and the peculiarity of the situation, not the body at this time?
Yeah, the defendant and the victim were both in one of the 12 guest rooms at the estate. They're both sitting, fully clothed in separate chairs. The defendant was very calm, relaxed, very relaxed. He wasn't showing any of the behaviours that I've observed when one witnesses or is involved in a death.
Bailiff, can we please have the coroner's report, Exhibit 17B8B, maybe listed as 1A? Thank you. The coroner's report states, the body of a female Chilean national, aged 48, 5 foot 8 inches, relatively slim, was found in a severe contracture, accelerated rigor mortis, with mandible damage in jaw dislocation. From all testings and damage, the events appear to have originated from within. There are no signs of external trauma. In your own words, DCS Roseblade, could you convey what you witnessed?
I've seen many things that no man should see, but this victim's face, her jaw was dislocated, her larynx was torn. There's no evidence it was done to her by a third party or by her own hands. Her own muscles did that to her.
The coroner's reported death seems to be attributed to a rare disease and possibly allergic reaction. Do you find this believable?
Given a time frame, no.
You yourself have investigated many crimes across a plethora of walks of life and likely have an extensive network. DCS Roseblade, given your professional experience and investigation, did the evidence shed any further light?
We eliminated physical causes. The victim was healthy. The toxicology showed no poisons. That only leaves something in the realm of biological or chemical warfare.
Bailiff, if we could have the toxicology report, Exhibit 1A/229G. Thank you. Let us change direction and talk about what prompted you to investigate further. After the initial arrest, the defendant was then bailed and you decided to explore. Our records show this was prompted by Professor Balsour. Is this correct?
Yeah, she contacted me after hearing about the event in the news. She said she'd met the victim when professionally collaborating with them, and she advised me to trace the descendant's lineage, his South American origins, and his scientific specializations. And I didn't see the relevance, but her research specializes in hematofacial microsomia, and the indicated cause of death, and she proved to me that the disease does not kill quickly, and a healthy adult would not succumb to it in just a few hours. This wasn't a natural death. That just left bio or chemical warfare methods, and it sounds far-fetched, but that was all that was left.
And did you inquire about the bio and chemical weapons?
Yeah, I did. I've inquired at the MOD. I've worked with them many times. I've got friends there. And sometimes I've asked too much and I've been gently shut down, pushed back, but that's fine. But this time, very different. I was shut down immediately, shut out. Met a wall of silence. There's an email to show that.
Indeed. Can we have the email, please? The evidence, Exhibit 2/66C. Thank you, DCS Roseblade. So, with this avenue no longer available, presumably your investigation had to take other routes. Your report notes that you traveled across the globe. Certainly your expenses reflect this. Now, when tracking the victim and the defendant, you noted and I quote, "It is difficult to substantiate the defendant had only a business-like relationship with the victim. His mother, Madame Dupuy, embedded herself deeply across many institutions across South America. Professor Bowser was correct. They had intersected at a meeting at the Cold Spring Harbor Laboratories in the year of 1987. Indeed, this is starting to look similar to what the defense is claiming. But can you first confirm the statement to be true?
Yeah.
Can you expand upon what else you discovered during the interview witness of that period, location, and event?"
Yeah. We found the victim and the defendant's relationship was not really that of uncle and aunt. There's not many records of them meeting until relatively close to the victim's death. The first witness meeting was 2 months before at a medical radiology conference in Chicago. They met 3 weeks before her death. They shared a Rolls Royce back from the Heathrow. Back 3 days before her death, she had an accident just at the NHS, or went into the NHS walk-in centre in Buckingham. Perfectly normal, nothing life-threatening, and he gave her a lift back from there. And on the day of the death, of course, she was at the party, as one might expect a niece to be, but no contact before 2 months before. It's weird. It's not usual. As for the defendant, for reasons of brevity, because there's a lot of history here, I'll skim over the less relevant details. He is the illegitimate son of Madame Dupuy. Whilst he's been very successful in his field, there's a lot of evidence that his mother's sponsorship helped to grow his business and elevate him to the House of Lords. For those who don't recall his mother's own story, she was descendant of slavers, friend of the Nazis, sometimes spouse of the British aristocracy, and closely linked to organisations set up to help Nazis escape to South America after the Second World War. She was particularly close to Lord Sempill, who, before the scandal surrounding his Nazi views, was influential in the defendant's business, getting a lot of NMOD contracts. But perhaps most significant to this case was that Madame Dupuy was in South America for several years after the war and was known to spend time in the company of high-ranking Nazis. Local investigations by the Nazi hunter Simon Wiesenthal strongly suggest that Madame Dupuy gave birth to the defendant at this time, and that the father was Dr. Josef Mengele, the Nazi angel of death, doctor, eugenicist, mass murderer, and conductor of medical experiments on living human beings. And we believe that the son took after the father and inherited his psychopathic indifference to human suffering. Now that we find out that the niece is a relative to Mengele, possibly she also had the same psychopathic tendency. I should add that there's a lot of evidence that psychopathic trends are inherited. I believe we have just one of the many scientific reports in the evidence.
Indeed, it's been called. Carry on, sir.
Perfect. The evidence that we have from Chile connects the suspect and the victim to a Chilean research facility that conducted experiments on living human beings, hence the wall of silence. And we suspect the victim was involved in these experiments, given her genetics, probably willingly, perhaps even enthusiastically, but that's putting too much onto the victim. What we do know is that the location of this facility, and I believe we've got some evidence again about it, the so-called Chilean House of Horrors.
The court would like to invite the defence to cross-examine in the interest of brevity.
Motion granted.
Thank you very much, my lord. It's difficult to know what your evidence gives us. Really, it's you say that the victim was very cold and relaxed. When did you become aware of the relationship of the defendant to the victim?
When you mentioned it, it didn't come up in our didn't come up.
Okay, so this is the first you've heard of it. Does it give you any cause to
one of the
review
main
your assessment of what the textbook response is when someone sees that their niece has died in front of them?
When someone's niece dies in front of them, I would not expect them to sit calmly to do nothing.
Calmly, not shocked. You're absolutely sure you know the difference.
I have seen a lot of death.
Counsel, I politely advise you against provoking the witness. Please proceed.
Yeah, you say that the defence witness coming up it had proven to you that the disease could not have done this. That's quite a big statement. How did she prove this to you?
There aren't many documented cases of this disease, but as you'll hear from the expert witness, those that are documented demonstrate a long and sad
Okay.
death.
So you can't share with us how it was proved. What
Objection,
do you
Your
know
Honour.
about
This
the
is
event?
unfair.
As you say,
The counsellor is badgering the witness.
Please repeat the objection. Please repeat the objection. Remind you of the need to talk one
Counsel
at a
Hager is
time.
badgering the witness, Your Honour. The witness here is to provide motive. It's Professor Balsaw that will provide the means. He's attacking the wrong person.
Enough, Counsel Jones. The court maintains that DCS Roseblade's testimony has potential to be material to the outcome of the case. Counsel Hager, please proceed.
thank you very much, my lord. I mean, it is true that if this witness has no comment on it, then he should not have made any comment on it. He made many comments on it, saying it's inconceivable that they could have died from the rare disease. So that he's certainly setting himself up as an expert. Can you tell me, DCS Roseblade, can you tell me what the advantages of someone using a bioweapon in a party in a situation like this would be over more normal weapons, poison or just a gun or a knife or anything else? Why would you go to complex bioweapons and all the rest of it? Why would you do that without kind of potentially, seeing as you're in the business, incriminating yourself? You're an expert in this. Can you give me any reason at all?
I think you may be asking me the questions for the expert witness. How about
No. I'm asking you why someone would use a bioweapon as opposed to a normal weapon in a situation such as this.
That's, I would imagine, to do an almost undetectable murder. Really, bioweapons are not my speciality. Detecting motives are. The victim was blackmailing Lord Desir. She was going to reveal his secret as a human vivisectionist. You can't be in the House of Lords as a human vivisectionist.
Well, no, I mean,
I delivered the motive. If you want to ask scientific questions, ask the scientist.
Yeah, I think I was commenting on what you said. Could
Yes,
you also
I
just be clear with me what you are saying the motive was?
The victim was going to reveal that Lord Desir was a human vivisectionist. We don't know why she was going to do that. Lord Desir was open about his other secrets, but this one...
And he knew this how? Did she tell him she was going to do this?
Can imagine so. She'd been out of his life for many, many years. Suddenly she reappears. Perhaps she needed money. Who knows? Either way.
The court would like to invite the prosecution to do a final cross-examination of the witness.
Thank you very much, Mr. Usher. I'd like to perhaps bring back the court case to something a bit more tangible and relevant to the matter at hand. And that is to the fact that the victim died and the alleged family link between the victim and the defendant has now been established, apparently, is highly atypical. DCS Roseblade, could you tell us a little bit more about your past experience? What kind of behavior would you expect to see, whether it's shock or absolute horror? Can you describe us a little bit what you would have expected the defendant to behave? How would you expect him to behave in that situation?
To have witnessed the death of a loved relative, shock manifests itself in many ways. I've seen many forms of shock. Trembling, nerves, agitation, never such cold calmness.
DCI Roseblade, if I may, the counsel, the defence, dare I say, seems to keep lambasting your motive. But tell me, do you not find it interesting to think that if you were successful in demonstrating such a precise bioweapon, this would not be incredibly valuable for someone who has quite a luxurious lifestyle? One might assume that this would be useful for terrorists.
Objection, my lord. 1 minute, the defendant isn't an expert on bioweapons, and the next minute he is an expert on bioweapons, able to comment on them.
Your Honour,
Counsel Hager, I'm satisfied that the prosecution are steering the case more towards the tangible, and I'm keen to see what bearing it has on the evidence. Please proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honour. If you could answer the question, Roseblade, we'd be very keen to know.
I'm no expert on the topic, but weapons that you have and your enemy does not have are always going to be valuable.
So it would be fair to say that as a motive, this would be quite polarizing.
Yeah. Very.
I see. DCI Roseblade, we thank you very much for your time. No further questions, Your Honour.
Thank you, counsel.
The court calls upon the prosecution to present their next witness.
Thank you, and I will gladly proceed. If it pleases the court, I would now like to seek to call our technical witness, Professor Carol Bossor, to stand for a testimony. First of all, Professor Bossor, could you confirm your name and credentials as well as your area of expertise?
Absolutely. My name is indeed Carol Bossor, and I am currently employed as head of genomic research at the Laboratory of Genetics at Cambridge University.
Thank you kindly. In the weeks prior to the death of the victim, Ms. Doria Paris, you became aware of a death. You were shocked at the details, in part because not only you suffered from hemifacial microsomia, but because you recognized immediately this could clearly not be the case. Now, given you both suffer and also an expert in the matter, could you tell us in your own words why this could not have been the case?
Hemifacial microsomia is indeed my speciality, and it is unfortunately a condition that I myself have suffered from. Since it's my field of research, I know beyond the shadow of a doubt that it was impossible that this condition could cause death so quickly. Furthermore, there is absolutely no indication of any facial disfigurement on the body itself or on Doria's face before that last evening. Hemifacial microsomia does not kill that quickly.
That sounds very clear indeed. Thank you, Professor. Let me ask you perhaps a very perhaps controversial question, but nevertheless important. Is there any evidence that the victim came from an interbreeding family?
Absolutely not. And this would have been in the autopsy report.
Thank you. So the coroner's report is essentially speculating down this avenue, right?
I consider that it is indeed a question of speculation and that the coroner could not find any other possible cause of death. So he decided that the reason for death was hemifacial microsomia, but he did not have the expert knowledge of this condition that I have.
Thank you, Professor. Now, perhaps on a more personal level, did you know the victim?
Yes, I had met Doria. Indeed, we'd worked together on a research project in the past, but that was quite a long time ago. Perhaps also it is germane to say that we did have a certain difference of opinion during our research together. You see, when you work on a research project, we rely on the data that each researcher brings to the project. And Doria just wouldn't tell me where she got her information from. And very quickly, I became rather suspicious and I demanded that she tell me. And since she refused, I ceased our scientific collaboration.
So perhaps could the victim be murdered as a result of fraud or perhaps exposing fraud? Is that what you're intimating, Professor?
I'm not sure it's my place to make such an intimation.
I would
It is
dispute,
possible.
counsel, whether the witness is either qualified or comfortable to answer that question.
I believe I'm being asked to make a speculation, and I give my opinion. It is
Sustained.
possible.
I accept. Counsel Satra, please proceed.
Thank you. As the defense clearly has a problem, I'll go straight to the scientific case, and perhaps we can bring exhibit, and we have so many evidence. Could we please bring exhibit 3/92E to the screen? Thank you very much. This should help us in the next side of the proceeding in explaining the science behind this murder case. So, Professor Bossor, in terms of biology, could you explain to us in basic terms how you understand the biology of this alleged bioweapon?
Well, I'll try to simplify. Indeed, I'm very happy that you brought up this particular slide, because this is the sad story of Maurice the mouse, who was exposed to the sort of viruses that I believe Doria was herself exposed to. You can see that we have a 4-step process. 4 different viruses were exposed to the mouse in turn. You can see that the viruses act as a sort of on-off mechanism for the genes. And whereas there is no initial reaction after the exposure to the first virus, by the time we get to virus 3, then the cells, as you can see, are seriously disturbed. It's as if somebody is manipulating the genome. The 4th virus is what we call the CRISPR virus. It's a cleanup. It almost removes every trace of the previous viral action. And what happens? Look at the picture of Paul Maurice. He's dead, just like Doria.
Thank you, Professor. I'm certainly not qualified to compare the face of a dead mouse to the face of a dead, sadly tragic death of a human, but it is certainly very clear from those pictures. And for those of you learned colleagues and members of the jury that know the science, this is very clear evidence that is presented to us. So in terms of this turning on and off of this gene, could you perhaps tell us a little bit more about how would the body be primed and how this sort of domino effect could be put in motion for us, please?
Well, you use the phrase domino effect, and that is indeed a very good description to what happened. The priming could only have been implemented by someone who was very familiar with the process, because it's not the particular viruses which are important, but the specific order with which they are brought into action. It's as if the whole system comes crashing down after the body is primed in this manner.
That sounds like there is clear evidence there. And would you believe that there was any evidence of or trace evidence of this cleanup exercise?
There will be if we look for it carefully, but I'd like to insist on the fact that this was highly specialized knowledge.
The court invites the defense to cross-examine.
Thank you, my lord. My goodness, Professor Balser, welcome. It's lovely to see you. Is it true, Professor Balser, you were in the top 5 of your class when you graduated?
That is indeed true.
And from my records and my research, you've given TED Talks on this. You're quite a specialist in genetics. Is that true?
That is indeed true.
So are you in fact a specialist in bioweaponry?
No, I'm not. But
have you ever seen a bioweapon being used?
May I finish? The fact is that viruses can be used, unfortunately, as bioweapons. That is a very sad truth.
But they can also be used to fix a cold. They can also be used to stop my toes from smelling. Viruses can be used for many things.
Objection. This is
Counsel,
nothing to do with the case.
I would dispute the ability of the court to verify the statement you just made and invite you to move on to more tangible matters, please.
Okay. Yes, certainly, my lord, Your Honour. So you make certain allegations here. You're saying that that there was a series of domino effects that allowed a series of events to happen that basically meant the victim died. And you're saying only a specialist could have that. But that would then possibly be you. You could be incriminating yourself. You say that the relationship between yourself and Doria had fallen apart. The fact is that she had your research money and you wanted it. I put it to you that you have a motive for killing her, not Lord Desir. Only you had the knowledge to do it. If this
Counsel Matoi, I agree with the underlying substance of your arguments. I'd caution you once again against making or intimidating statements and invite you to proceed on that.
Your Honour, the witness has testified that only a very select few people could have actually done this. Only a very select few people could have done this, and she is the only qualified person here tonight with that knowledge.
Counsel, I'd advise you to address the witness and not myself.
Okay. So, is it true that the relationship between you and Doria Paris had fallen apart because you wanted her research funding.
That is
Objection, Your
absolutely
Honour. We've already
untrue.
established this. This was already giving the answer that the research fell apart because of untrustworthy sources, not because of the funding.
Objection overruled,
But
counsel. I don't know that it has been disputed beyond reasonable doubt.
Yeah.
And I would invite the counsel once again to proceed in his own time.
So this becomes a matter of he said, she said, or she said, she said. You say one thing, but our evidence shows and our historic research shows that you had an acrimonious separation from her because you were after her research funding. Your program was being strangled and it fell apart. This is just nothing more than an excuse. So,
Objection.
so you had
Objection.
motive.
Do you have any proof, any evidence that this would be the case, Counsel Meteo?
We do.
Would you be able to present that
Counsel,
evidence
further
for
to
us?
that, I would add, please give the defence counsel time to state their case, as we've done for yourselves.
Well, so what we have is in witness testimony, yeah, my lord. So we don't actually have it in paper. Unlike the prosecution, we actually have witness testimony from people who know.
Well, I would be very interested to discover who are these people who know. My disagreement with Doria dates back for over 20 years. If I were a potential murderer, I would be an eminently slow one, would I not? How could you possibly know the reasons for my disagreement with Doria? As I've already stated, I was not happy with the source of her data. She would not tell me. And my ethics prevented me from continuing to work with her on the project. And that is all.
You weren't happy. That's all I needed to know. Thank you, my lord. I pass to counsel.
Thank you, counsel.
Thank you, Your Honour. If you're happy for me to proceed.
Please proceed in your own time, Counsel Jones.
Professor Balser, I'd be very curious to know, given the fact that you are being claimed as one of these people who could potentially be guilty, why would you have come forward to help the case?
That's a very good question.
So it would be fair to say that if you were guilty, coming forward would be the last of your options. Is that correct?
I don't see why I would want to incriminate myself.
Seems
I would
perfectly
also remind the court that I was a volunteer. When I read in the newspaper the claimed cause of death in this case, I myself volunteered. I went to the police to see if I could be of service.
Indeed you did. And one might argue that such ethical backbone and moral steel is why you sit here giving evidence against Lord Desir, where this apparently is absent. So, given that you and Lord Desir, how many other people in the world potentially have your skill set with which to action such an incriminating murder?
There are indeed very few of them, perhaps less than a handful, 5, 6, but
5 or 6.
2 of them are in this courtroom.
So given that there's such a few number of them, how many of them have access to knowledge through very, very sinister circumstances, given the fact that you yourself even commented stating that Lord Desir's knowledge and expertise was quite phenomenal, dare I say beyond that you're aware of?
You may dare to say that. I totally agree with that statement. I've never known where Lord Desir got his particular data from.
Thank you very much, Professor. No further questions, Your Honour.
The court would ask the prosecution to present their next witness.
Graciously, if it pleases the court, we would like to invite Lord Derek Sinclair. May you present yourself, sir.
Hello, hello. Good afternoon.
Thank you graciously. Bailiff, I believe we have some audio. Might you make this available for our audience? If you could make this a little bit louder, that would be most gracious.
Do I always have to clean up your mess? Nothing has changed since we were kids. It's no wonder I'm Mama's favourite. You're never able to tidy things up. You always leave something hanging, Fabby. It really is such a waste of your talents. You really aren't going to be able to do anything about it, and it all just makes you seem so weak. Fabi, let me just say one thing. Such a torrent of suffering will be unleashed on you if you don't do something about this.
Thank you, Bailiff.
Remember that time?
Lord Derek Sinclair, you are the half-brother of Fabio de Sire. You're a House of Lords yourself, and indeed quite a character. This rather threatening tone would indicate that you had a vested interest in seeing what the defense claims to be the niece of Fabio de Sire. This is quite a claim. Now, up until recently, you were not aware of your brother's existence. Can you comment on the threatening manner with which you speak to him in this phone conversation?
Well, our relationship, as you say, is a relatively recent one, and it was one that came as quite a surprise. I mean, I consider myself to be the guardian of our family's secrets. There comes a sort of burden of being a member of the aristocracy. And as I was to discover, this is not something that Lord Fabio de Sire was to take seriously. I found him to be a very flaky character with absolutely no sense of duty.
Defense witness.
Thank you very much. Lord Sinclair, thank you for that. I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what we are to learn from one half of a conversation without any context. You found him a flaky character. Why? Could you expand on that, please?
Well, we're talking here, as I said, I am the guardian of some of the family secrets. And you may have said earlier that Fabio de Sire was the uncle of Doria Paris. That was true, that they may well have been uncle and niece, but the age difference was not the one would normally expect in such a case. Their age difference was incredibly close, and their relationship was, shall we say, not particularly wholesome.
Whoa, that's some interesting, because he's, I think he's 72 and she was 48. I don't see that that's particularly close.
The court would remind the counsel that it is the prosecution's question now.
Sustained.
Thank you. Thank you. Going back to the case at hand, Lord Derek Sinclair, could you tell us in your own words how your relationship could be described with the defendant, not just in the last few years, but over the course of the past few decades?
Well, I'm aware that he is a very talented person, but all brothers, of course, have their differences. Look at Boris and Joe Johnson, Fraser and Niles Crane, Prince Harry and Prince William. They all have their differences. Sometimes they get resolved, but for us, there was an underlying tension. And it was because I know that Fabio de Sire is really no good.
No further question.
Defence's final question. There's time for one more.
For me, Your Honour. Lord Sinclair, is it normal for you to record all your phone calls?
Well, I'm not actually sure how this got into the public domain.
You're not sure?
This may well have been Fabio, I think, double crossing me. He was certainly capable of that, maybe trying to cover up his tracks.
So why would he record a damning side of the?
The court calls upon the prosecution to present their final witness.
Thank you very much. And if it pleases the court now, I would like to invite to the witness box Madame de Pury, mother of Lord Fabio Desio, to the witness. Madame de Pury, would you mind confirming your identity and relationship to the defendant?
Yes, my name is Madame de Pury, and I am the mother of the defendant, Lord Fabio Desio.
Thank you very much. And I see that Lord Desio's genius scientific knowledge is able to ensure your age is very, very well masked through these genetic sources of information.
Relevance,
I'm sure
counsel.
we'll go on. Thank you. I'll move on to the point. If it pleases the court, could we bring exhibit number 4A54U, please? And this relates to Lord Fabio Desio's term at school, at the Chesham Grammar School to be more precise, just before he was awarded a scholarship to do further studies. And I'll spare you the reading of the whole letter, but I'll simply state, and I have the physical evidence in front of me. On your return from Chile, I would be most grateful if you could meet me and Mr. Peladi, as Fabio needs to understand the severity of his actions. Could you tell us a little bit more about the gravity and the severity of the behavior of Lord Fabio Desio when he was at school?
So actually, Fabio was a great student, as you can see, really smart, really working hard. But yeah, there was sometimes this other side that came out sometimes. It's just very sad to speak about. And seeing that was sometimes very, very frightening.
Court invites
Thank you.
to cross-examine.
If it please the court, welcome, Madame de Pury. Is it true that you had twin sons when
Yes.
Fabio was born?
Yes, that is true.
Because, if it please the court, could I please bring defense witness A, our first piece of material up? So the evidence A for the defense. This is the birth certificate of Fabio Desio. And it says that you are indeed the mother, but the father, it says, unknown. But look at the bottom. The certificate is 76015. And more importantly, Dorella Chu was the registrar at the time in Santiago, and this is not her signature, nor is the color of the ink. This is Fabio's birth certificate. So we asked to look and see if there was any more. Can I bring up evidence B, please?
Objection, Your Honor. Could I ask that this evidence has been verified, please?
It is. It's from the
Objection overruled. Counsel, it's on the defence counsel to demonstrate verification of the evidence in
So,
question. Counsel
evidence
Mattelli,
B.
please proceed.
So you see the certificate number is 616010. It's an earlier birth certificate. It has Dorella Chu's signature. It's blue, but look carefully. The father's name is Wolfgang Gerhardt. Wolfgang Gerhardt was the name of Joseph Mengele when he died and when he was buried under this. And then if we could go to evidence number C, please. And we see that his twin brother was born and it's certificate number 11. So this is the evidence that we have that show that Stefan and Fabio were in fact twin brothers, and Stefan is the father of Doria Paris. They are father and niece. And finally, I ask for evidence number D, please. This is the family tree. We asked Fabio to do a DNA test, and this is what we found. Fabio indeed has several half-brothers. Derek Sinclair is his half-brother, Stefan is his full brother, and Ralph Mengele is his other half-brother. And look at the bottom, Doria Paris is his niece. They share blood. And more importantly, look at the bottom right. Fabio's two sons died in infancy, aged 1, from the same
Objection,
disease.
Your Honor. Could the defense counsel get to the point and ask a witness question, please?
Sustained.
So Madame de Pury, is it true that you raised Fabio and that Wolfgang Gerhardt raised Stefan?
Well,
They were separated.
well, that we raised them together. But as you can imagine, that when you're in a relationship where you're being controlled, that things can slip sometimes. And when you're very frightened to be in such a relationship and being manipulated by someone such as Joseph is very frightening.
Well, his name was Wolfgang at this point, and our
Right.
evidence shows that
The court would
Fabio
ask the
went with you.
prosecution to cross-examine.
Thank you, my learned colleague. One final question, if I may, Madam Madipiro. It seems that murder seems to run in your family. Would you not consider the fact that genetically the offspring that you have, regardless of twins, is equally capable of murder, given the family history?
Yes. Yes, I do.
The court, would Your Honour like to proceed to an intermission before the defence's case?
Yes, I would. I would now, suggested by the usher, like to call an adjournment of the court for a 5-minute intermission. Upon return, there will be a 3-minute presentation by the court bailiff, Mr. Guy McNair Wilson, after which my learned colleague will then continue to initiate the second half of the event. Proceedings will resume upon completion of the intermission. Court adjourned.
All rise for the Honourable Justice Sloyan. Be seated.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, for your patience thus far. We've completed our first segment, which is the prosecution's case, and we will now proceed to our second segment, during which the court will hear the defence's case. I will once again hand back to my learned colleague, the usher, to oversee the court proceedings. In my own capacity as presiding court justice, I will continue to monitor and oversee the session as I see fit, as the defense proceeds with their case. Counsel Hagger, you may commence in your own time.
Sorry, could I interject? McNair Wilson wishing to say something, if that's okay, before we kick off.
Sustained.
So it's me again, Club President, Hamwic Speakers. I cannot believe what I've been watching here. I'm so much in awe of this performance, and so welcome to Act 2. I'd like to say also that the distinguished Toastmaster and World International President Richard Peck is now in the building, and certainly very welcome, Richard. And I'm desperately looking forward to your cross-examination by the prosecution, so I hope you're ready for that. I'd like to remind everybody that the last two witnesses, as far as I'm aware, were completely impromptu speaking, so they had no idea really what they were going to be asked. So it's quite amazing, really, from Toastmasters standards. Now, things are going to really heat up now in terms of the defendant, Fabio Desio, is going to be cross-examined. And this is, I know, going to have some raised voices and quite a lot of emotion, because I don't know if you know, but Fabio is a very, very accomplished Toastmaster speaker, having reached the semi-finals in Chicago of the World International Speech Contest in 2018. So Fabio, good luck to you. Now, there is a reason, there's a backstory to this court thing that we're doing today. And it's the reason why we have the High Sheriff of Hampshire here today, Sue Coleman. This is because I'd like to announce that Hamwic Speakers are proud to announce a new relationship with Winchester Prison. It's a big prison in the UK. It's a Category B men's prison. And we have followed the inspiration that Toastmasters USA have done with prisons, where we are looking to help Winchester Prison nurture them to create their own Toastmaster club within the prison. This hopefully should be the first, well, this is going to be the first one of its kind in the UK. And based upon the sort of the results from America, it looks like Toastmasters clubs significantly reduce reoffending. And so that's something that is really important to us. And that's why Sue Coleman is here to provide the general evaluation at the end, because her role as the High Sheriff is to encourage ways to reduce reoffending and enhance conditions within prisons. So also one other thing I'd like to say is, by coincidence, which we didn't know when we started this, that the lead defense in this particular case happens to be, as I understand, the head of commissioning in the Police and Crime Commissioning Department for the UK. And so he's mentioned that he's very excited about the possibility of integrating Toastmasters within other prisons. So there's a deeper meaning behind all of this, but wow, I am seriously impressed, and I'd like to pass you on. Oh, one other thing I was going to say to that. So if you or I or Fabio ends up in prison from anything, at least we'll be satisfied to know that there will be a Toastmasters club to satisfy us. On to the end.
Counsel, once again, you may commence in your own time.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to introduce Lord Fabio Desio.
I'm here. I'm here.
Fabio Desio, I cannot see Fabio Desio. Ah, thank you very much. Fabio Desio, can you please tell the court who your father is?
My father is Joseph Mingler.
And can you tell the court when you discovered this?
I would like to tell you my story, if I can.
Please.
So, ladies and gentlemen, court, judge,
It's the moment of truth. It's the moment where the lies are not good anymore. And I'm here for that reason, because not only they are accusing me for something that I never done before. Yes, I am a Lord this year. People say that I'm arrogant, and you can see my brother, how arrogant he is. But today I made a decision. I will show my heart with all of you. In my life, I had so much pain. I have a beautiful wife. She's beautiful. She's amazing. And we had 3 children. And 2 died from the same disease story of the victim. We have another beautiful girl that she's still alive. She's Anna, she's 36, and we love so much her. In my life, I had a lot of pain. As you heard, my mother, she didn't tell me the truth of my family. Family is the most important thing in the world. In 1973, I saw a man in TV, and he was looking like me. Like me, do you understand? For me, it was a shock. It was such a thing. I said to my mother, Mother, who is this person? And she said, Fabio, I lied to you. I lied all your life. You can imagine. I want to ask you a question. If you were in my position, what would you do? I was devastated. And I found in that moment that I had as a brother, Stefan. Stefan, it was my twin brother that was left to my dad, and I was with her, with my mother, that we never had a great relationship, as you can see. When I found who was my father, I was devastated, because that man represented all my objections about what does it mean life. Because yes, it's true what they say, that I have a lot of talent, I studied a lot, but this is only a sacrifice of my skills. And tonight, all people, they're accusing me of something that I could do to the most important person I found in my life, my niece, that I found only 6 months ago, that she was my niece. This situation is really painful for me, because in my life, how can I say, I am man. To be a lord, you have to have some values. The most of the people they are accusing me, they don't have. Like, they don't have the value of integrity. They are talking so difficult. What do you think? I'm talking like your language, the language of people, as well if I am a lord. I have courage, what my brother didn't have. Me and my niece,
Lord Fabio, I must interject. While myself and the court appreciate the sentiment, I would gently prompt you along to finish your testimony.
Okay, the last thing I want to tell you, the last thing, as you can see, this is not the evidence, but this is something that Doris, she gave me 5 months ago when we just met, we understood our relationship. So this, because as you can see, a lord would not wear something like that, but this is about a relationship of love. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Fabio Desir.
The court calls upon the prosecution to cross-examine.
Thank you, my learned colleague. Lord Desir, I'll start with a small question. My understanding is being a psychopath means that you don't actually have any care. So, you know, niece or not, you wouldn't actually care about her death.
Oh, objection, Your Honour. That's an outrageous slanderous mark.
Objection sustained. Counsel Jones, please refrain from provoking the witness, the defendant.
Of course, Your Honour, I apologise. I apologise. Let me try a different question, if I may. Perhaps we could talk about the devastation that Lord Desir sort of fabricates. Is it not true that devastation is more about the loss of the network and the science behind your father that you lost? That was why you were upset.
me and Dory, we were
Your
me and Dory-
father, your biological father.
my father, honestly, I didn't have any relationship with my father.
No relationship with your father. I see. So you never inherited or managed to obtain any scientific skills from.
I inherited everything, but only to do the good of the world, to make the world a better place. We were working on that, me and Doria, because my children died for that disease.
I see. And did you experiment on them as well?
Counsel,
Objection, Your Honor.
I reiterate, with respect to making provocative statements, please
Your Honor, I'm
comply
merely
or you'll be
clarifying
denied
that
your
he did
turn
not.
to examine the witness.
Objection,
Proceed.
Your Honor. Objection, Your Honor. This is a court of law, not a Christopher Nolan movie. The Joseph Mengele
Sustained.
died in 79, and so
I will rephrase, Your Honor. I will move on. I take note. Lord Desir, could we perhaps review the evidence? Bailiff, could we have our next slide? I believe, let me just double check. We should have an achievements 5/31K. Could we have that presented? And Lord Desir, it must be said that you have quite a substantive list of achievements. Indeed, looking across this, there's not many responsibilities you've not had, given that you've been from Royal Society, you've been on many boards by the looks of it. Quite a history of success. Congratulations. I assume they're all awarded on merit and not on your wealth and connections. Do you notice the common link?
There is no link.
No link. Allow me to guide you. If you'll see, in every position, you were the decision maker on the research funding where it was sequestered and you had access to that information. Had you forgotten?
I did everything I did in my life. I did only for the better, for make a world. Look how emotional I am tonight, thanks to you. Because thanks to you, I feel really emotional because you are talking about my story. It's a story of love.
I see. Emotional story or not, it's very tricky when you're caught in a web of lies. Let us move on to a different one.
Counsel, I must remind you of the need to take into account the emotional state of the defendant.
Objection. There is no web of lies being established here at all. This is just slander.
Counsel, I'd ask you to leave Counsel Jones to proceed, and the court will decide that for itself on the balance of evidence presented. On you go, Counsel.
Thank you, Your Honour. Don't you find it odd, if we could have the next piece of evidence, Bailiff, please. Don't you find it odd in 2000, you were made a fellow of the Royal Society? So I know that's the different evidence there. If we can get rid of that, please. It would be evidence.
Objection, Your Honour. That piece of evidence was brought forward to try and stir up sentiment within the jury. That was uncalled for. I would ask that be stricken from testimony.
Counsel Matoi, my opinion is that that's for myself as the
misalignment.
Justice of the Court to decide. Counsel Jones, in your own time, please.
Thank you, Gracious Honour. I shall move on. Lord Fabio Desir, is it true that you hold a master's degree in biochemistry, which you achieved with distinction from the University of Sheffield?
I'm a really talented person. Yes.
So it would be fair to say that you have the capacity to handle a lot of complex scientific data.
I have, as I said,
yes or no will suffice.
No, I don't want to say yes or no. Because
objection, relevance, Your Honour.
Objection, Your Honour, counter objection. It's just a simple question. Is he has
objection
the capacity?
Overruled. The relevance is for the court to decide upon the balance of evidence. Lord Desio, if you would, in your own time.
Yes, I can reply. I know I have the knowledge to do it, but me and Dora, we were working to save the world for that disease.
And how did you plan to save the world, Lord Desir? Was this through biochemical weapons?
You don't. Unfortunately, I think that you are my prosecution. You don't know the meaning of a relationship of an uncle and niece.
Tell us about your relationship with your niece then. What was her childhood like growing up?
We didn't know each other because unfortunately she was the look how emotional I am.
Counsel,
objection, Your Honour. Objection, Your Honour.
I invite the court to move on.
Yes. Thank you, Your Honour.
I invite the defence to deliver their final cross-examination.
Thank you very much, my lord. Can I just finish this off by asking you, Lord Fabio Desir, The prosecution made great play of the fact that you were very quiet when you were confronted with the death of your niece. Have you got anything you'd like to say about that?
Yeah, I was shocked. Of course, you can imagine my niece. We were at this party. This party was a celebration about how we can make the world a better place. How can we use our knowledge to make the world better? She died in front of me. I was shocked before someone said, I know the person, but I don't want to say the name because I think there was a lack of respect of me. And they said that I was calm. I was like, I didn't care. I didn't care. She was my niece. I didn't care. She was my niece. I will tell all night that she was my niece.
Thank you very much, Lord Fabio.
So if I was shocked, if I was shocked, it's because she was the only thing, the only relationship I had with my family. Because look, my mother.
Thank you, Lord Fabio.
The courts request the defence call their next witness.
Thank you, my lord. I call to the witness stand Jorge Trevino. Welcome, Jorge. Can you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Jorge Trevino. I'm a public relations specialist for and major account manager for Zurich Insurance Group.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, on the evening of where the victim passed away, your witness statement says that you were at the party, and also you were the first to find both the defendant and the victim. Can you please tell me in your own words what you saw?
Yes, it was kind of shocking. When I arrived to the room, the first thing I saw was Fabio. He looked deeply troubled. He was actually muttering two words, Maddox, David, Maddox, David. So that's what I understood. Then I actually saw that the victim was there. I knew that she was dead. I don't know why, but the scene was just so shocking that
Objection, Your Honour. The witness is not qualified to make the assessment of death. That would be down to the coroner.
Objection overruled. It's not the witness's intention to make the assessment of death, and I will invite him to proceed in his own time.
Thank you, Your Honor. I went and aided my friend, Lord Fabio. I am not an expert in seeing people in shock. I just have a couple of months back, we were in a car accident, my wife and myself, and she was actually in shock, and I had to play out. And that's what happened in this scene with Lord Fabio. I actually aided him, and I called the police because I think it was very important that the important people were at that moment in that place, because a death had occurred according to my impressions.
Thank you, Jorge. And did you see the defendant touch the victim at all?
No. During the party, I actually saw Lord Fabio and the victim engaging, but Lord Fabio is kind of eccentric. He doesn't like to be touched, and he doesn't like to touch. So during the night, I only saw that they were speaking to each other.
And did you see, when you came in and found the defendant and the victim, did you see the defendant give anything or take anything from the victim?
No, I did not saw that.
So you didn't see the two interact at all. They just happened to be in the same room, and he witnessed the event in front of him. But you couldn't see any evidence that he in some way prepared her, gave her anything, or did anything to make this happen?
No, like I said, I only saw them speaking to each other.
Can you tell me, please, how would you class Fabio? What's he like as a person?
Well, everybody could say that Lord Fabio is an arrogant person, an eccentric person. To be honest, the only time that I have seen him bad, well, it's kind of embarrassing, but I will tell it because I'm here to to clarify what Lord Fabio is for me. I was at the dinner with him, and I'm kind of a clumsy person. So I was placing something on a shelf, and that prompted an accident. A television fell, some antiques of Lord Fabio that were very valuable also fell. And suddenly I saw Lord Fabio watching me. He was pretty mad. And I thought that was my moment. But Lord Fabio only told me, quickly, bring me a glass of water. You see, a fishbowl had fell and broken, and a goldfish was dying. So Lord Fabio took my glass and he placed the goldfish in there. That was the first time and only time I ever saw Lord Fabio mad, and I knew that he was a saint.
Thank you very much. Now, did you know about the relationship between the victim and the defendant?
Not to my knowledge, to that day, that was the first time I ever saw them interacting at that party.
Brilliant. I pass to my counsel, to the prosecution, Your Honor.
Thank you, my counsel. Fascinating evidence, isn't it? It is incredible how the defense is trying to portray Lord Fabio De Sio as such a calm, good-natured individual, almost like a small fish in a big pond, as your latest witness clearly tried to exemplify. Now, could we please bring some evidence to this court, please? Could we bring evidence 7/17P? So this would be this
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
Councillor Matoe, for the court to decide the relevance based on the council's subsequent case. Council, I invite you to proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. A very important statement to be made here. Jorge Trevino, do you recognize any of the individuals on these various pictures?
Yes, I do.
Would you classify those individuals as good-natured, calm, saints?
I don't know them.
Objection, Your Honor. None of these people are on trial.
I can only vouch him for 5 minutes.
Objection overruled, as the council hasn't had sufficient time to make their case. The relevance or irrelevance will be decided subsequent to it. Proceed.
I only know personally Lord Fabio De Sio. The other people I only have seen in the media.
Thank you. So clearly those figures on these pictures are clearly and evidently famous, and shall I add, not for the right reasons. So we have here pictures of Lord Fabio De Sio portrayed as a saint, portrayed as somebody that wouldn't hurt a fish, yet evidently closing shoulders with North Korean leader, very close to President Putin as well. Clearly individuals that have been shown as, shall we say,
Objection, Your Honor. The defendant's role as a weapons expert is well known, and that's why he's in the House of Lords. His job is to trade weapons to nations on behalf of the British government. The fact that he's touched base with these people, he's also
Objection
touched base with lots of
sustained,
American...
counsel. With that being said, I will give the prosecution their allocated time to state their case. Now, Counsel Sartre, in your own time, please.
Thank you. I will rephrase my question and get to the point. Based on those pictures, would you not agree that Lord Fabio De Sio had clear links with international terrorism and state terror?
I mean, Councillor, those only are photographs. If you look at Fabio De Sio's Facebook page, you will find many pictures. And I don't know the relations of those photographs. I cannot speculate on them. So I don't know. That's your opinion. My opinion is I only see photographs of Lord Fabio with people that appear on media.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will simply remind the court that on one of these pictures, Lord Fabio De Sio was pictured with a world leader only a few weeks prior to a clearly and evidently documented evidence of terror by poisoning through bioweapons in an airport. I rest my case. No further questions here.
Thank you.
The court would like to call upon the defence to call their next witness.
So over to you, my co-counsel.
Thank you very much, my lord. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are very, very lucky tonight. I would like to call to the stand Sir Richard Peck. Mr. Peck, Sir Richard, is the international president, no less, of the College of Bioweaponry and Genetic Science. And I'd like to welcome him here tonight as the expert globally in the issues that we are discussing. So Richard, can you tell us a little bit, please, just to honour us? We're honoured that you're here. If you could let us know a little bit more about your background.
Well, thank you. Yes, I can. As you've heard, my credentials where I am employed. I've also had the privilege of knowing the defendant for many years and know of his credentials, but I also know him of an individual of kind character, something that has not been portrayed here tonight. We can see that in the emotional aspect. I can also tell you that although he is knowledgeable in bioweaponry, he does not have the skill set to be able to develop what the court is presenting against him. There's a difference between knowledge and practicality. He has the knowledge, but he does not have the ability to be able to move forward with it.
Thank you very much, Sir Richard. You've seen all of the statements and details of this case, and yeah, I know that you are very aware of the disease hemifacial microsomia. It is very rare, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is.
And you know, how much do we know about it, in all honesty?
Well, I think as in any disease, we're constantly learning about it. But because it is in such a small portion of the population, it takes longer to figure these things out. And we're always conducting more study. That being said, there is so much unknown about it that it's really hard to pinpoint what the ultimate result of the disease is without continuing to have that investigation, without continuing to have those studies on it.
Because I mean, we have had police officers kind of like speaking with incredible levels of certainty about, you know, the progress of the disease. How is this possible?
Well, if you have a little knowledge about something, you can definitely speak to it with confidence. However, I would dare say that if you expand the conversation, the depth of knowledge will get smaller, and the ability to answer properly will also falter.
Thank you very much for that. Do you think that, I mean, there's a kind of a logic problem?
The court would like to call on the prosecution to cross-examine.
Proceed.
Thank you very much, Your Honor. So Richard Peck, thank you so much for being with us this evening. And I will acknowledge publicly your great contributions to the world of science, bioweapons in particular, and certainly some of the great work that you have done to help countries around the world do the right thing. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, everybody in the court, I have a piece of evidence that I would like to be played in this court, if that's possible, Mr.
That cultural awareness, cultural understanding, spot on. I really appreciate that. I'm going to give you a special congratulations on that because not everybody does that. Simulta.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Now, from this very short excerpt from a recent conversation, from a recent talk that Sir Richard Peck, you kindly gave to a scientific conference only about a couple of hours ago. It clearly appears to me that you are insinuating, or even, shall I say, praising the scientific work of Lord Fabio De Sio in his ability to
Objection, Your Honour.
culturally
Lord Fabio,
bioweapons.
objection, Your Honour. Lord Fabio was not mentioned in that oral discourse whatsoever.
Objection sustained, and the court maintains that the onus is on the prosecution to prove that he was. Counsel Sartre, please proceed.
Thank you very much. Perhaps I'll rephrase and paraphrase the content of that praise. So Richard Peck clearly demonstrated during that segment that it is possible to target bioweapons, in praising individuals that do so. Is it not therefore possible, as we clearly seen through the erratic behavior at times of Lord De Sio, that he could, in secret, develop those weapons?
Well,
objection, Your Honour. He's insinuating that the defendant's
Counsel,
guilty already.
please give the witness time to give his testimony. Sir Peck, please proceed in your own time.
thank you, Your Honor. I think that you've taken that whole statement, that whole speech out of context. You've played 30 seconds of a 2-minute speech. And we could take anything that came out of conversation and adjust it to the way we want it. Was I possibly congratulating him for the work he's done? Yes. Shouldn't we recognize individuals for their positive contributions? I think here, the difference is you're trying to take a positive acknowledgement and turn it into something that becomes a negative focus. And I would caution which side of the coin you look at when you listen to the conversation. If you play the whole thing, I think you'll read it a little differently. I think the court would read it a little differently.
The court would like to ask the defense to continue their explanation.
Thank you, Your Honour. Sir Richard, welcome here tonight. It has been made. We've been made aware that you have some other interests. This organisation called Toastmasters, I believe. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your involvement with that?
Well, thank you. I would. And I think it will state to the ability to recognize individuals and their character as an organization that is devoted to helping others develop their communication and leadership skills. We also spend time identifying leaders and helping to encourage them and grow. We also have a series of core values that we follow: integrity, respect, service, and excellence. There is no reason for me to sacrifice my core values, which are in alignment with those, to present a testimony that would not be prudent to this case. As I look at the defendant, who I've known for years, I have watched him develop as a leader. I've watched him develop as an individual who upholds those same core values. As a person, I would not stay involved with somebody who went against my values, because the one thing in life I will never sacrifice is my integrity, my respect, and my service, or my excellence to my fellow man.
Well said, Sir Richard. Well said. Thank you very much. Is it also true that you saw Lord Fabio being charitable with his time and his research, and trying to gift and give stuff back to the community that helped him grow as a person?
Yeah, I believe that I have seen that. I think the members who know him, the community that knows him, has seen that as well. He's been made a lord, which is not something that is just given out willy-nilly. He has continued to contribute to society to the best of his ability. And I think that is what we need to consider when we think about contributing back to our fellow man. It's the limit to which you can contribute that's important. And as long as you're doing it to that point, then you are truly living up to who you are as an individual. And I have witnessed that from Lord De Sio.
The court would like to ask the prosecution to cross-examine.
Proceed.
Thank you, my learned colleague. Sir Peck, it is very, very gracious of you to grace us with your time. You're obviously quite a substantive individual in your field. Indeed, a bioweapons expert. You would be quite thrilled, I have no doubt, with this case, pulling it apart and finding the details. So admirable. But I have a question for you, sir. It perplexes me, given your time and your contacts with DARPA and indeed the industry complex. You are sworn to secrecy, are you not, under the Secrets Act of the CIA? So you are under no obligation to admit any truth under witness of perjury. Is that not true, sir?
Well, I think that catches you in quite an interesting situation, doesn't it? Because if I'm held under an oath not to perjure myself, because I can't share secrets, that I come to a court where perjury would put me in its own particular situation, then why would I come forward as a witness?
Indeed, sir, the absence of your information is somewhat informational. So by saying that you have nothing, you are in fact saying that you do know something but cannot say it.
Well, I think that's what you're saying, that maybe you have nothing
exactly
and you're
what
trying
I'm saying,
to,
but,
maybe
that
you
is
have.
Counsel,
maybe-
the court politely implores you to get back in your box and let the witness speak.
Of course, Your Honor, I apologize, Sir Peck.
Oh, no, please continue. I'd like to hear the line of your questioning to determine whether it has relevance or whether you have nothing to say.
Sustained.
I believe the relevance is that your knowledge of bioweapons positions you very well to understand the meaning of this case. Indeed, you know that the defendant is not only capable and has done it, he has done it on behalf of the United States of America, of which you so approved under your project management.
So I would say that my knowledge of bioweaponry does put me in a position to address the court. But then I would say counter to that, then your lack of knowledge of bioweaponry may not put you in a position to be trying in this situation.
The court would call upon the defense to deliver a final cross-examination.
Thank you very much, my lord. Sir Richard, thank you again for coming today. We feel honored. Your integrity is beyond reproach. You've made a statement about Lord Fabio, which paints a picture different from the prosecution. Would you have any parting remarks for the court session here today?
Well, I think when it comes to Lord Fabio, it's up to us to view the individual as who they are and what we know about them and what has been presented. It is the prosecution's role to make Lord Fabio look the way he does. It is those of us who know him, those of us who are the industry experts, who are here to stand up for the weakness, to stand up for those and defend them when others are coming after them. I think that is what we all need to do. We need to come to those individuals at a time of need and defend them against those who are trying to tear them down.
Thank you. Calls upon the defense to deliver their final, to call their final witness.
If it please the court, I would like to call to the witness stand Marco Antonio Pinochet.
Hola.
So for the record, please state your name and your relevance.
My name is Marco Antonio Pinochet. Yeah, I am here because I was at the party, but I know the victim's father.
Okay, thank you, Marco. So are you or are you not the son of General Augusto Pinochet?
No, I am el hijo, the son of the great Augusto Pinochet.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you verify?
Sorry, the court calls upon the prosecution to cross-examine.
Proceed.
Thank
Counsel,
you.
in your own time, once again, please proceed.
I hadn't finished my line of questioning, my lord.
Your Honour, if it pleases the court, we'd provide an extra time to defence counsel to finish his questioning, and we will sequester the end point if that suits them.
I approve the request. Sustained. Please proceed in your own time.
I will go through fast. Is it true that can you verify Stefan Gerhardt assisted your father in creating and architecting the plan for the disappeared in 1973?
He no assisted, he was el arquitecto. He was el diablo del muerte.
So Stefan was, and can you also say that you also knew the victim herself, his daughter? Is it true to say that she was ashamed of her father's behavior?
Oh, she was not impressed, to be polite.
Objection, Your Honour. Relevancy. This seems to be drifting. Can you kind of
No,
go back to some sort of motive or some sort of
sustained?
This goes to the motive and the relationship between the defendant and the victim. What we have here is a tragedy. It's not a murder. What happens is we have two children who are ashamed of the sins of their fathers. The witness's testimony goes directly to that. So Doria Perry was ashamed of her father, ashamed of her father's behaviors, and our witness will testify this. So can you please finish your statement, Marco?
Gracias mucho. So my father, he was a great man who full believed in economic liberalization. He wanted to make Chile like the West, but unfortunately,
Objection, Your Honour. We cannot possibly have in a court of law somebody praising a dictator.
It's his father. Many
Counsel, I'd
children.
ask you to suspend disbelief until the council has finished their examination.
If I may, I think the hermano in question, he is misunderstood. I am here to correct the misconception about my father Pinochet. He had a great idea with the economics and in developing. He loved the West. He loves this great country, the UK. But unfortunately, he trusted people in his ruling, in his cabinet. English, ¿cómo se dice English?
He trusted
I
Stefan
would like to
Gerhardt.
remind the witness to bear in mind the relevance of the testimony. Please proceed.
So who was the overall architect for the children of the disappeared? Your father or Stefan Gerhardt?
Stefan, and unfortunately, because Pinochet was the head, he had to put up with all this damage to his reputation. It was not fair. It was all Stefan Gerhardt. He is an evil man. Es el diablo del muerte. Es el diablo.
Okay, thank you.
Common
Thank you very much.
attacks.
So I passed it to co-counsel, to the prosecution, my lord.
Proceed. I'd ask that the witness please address us from the same courtroom next time. Carry on.
Thank you, Your Honour, and my learned colleague. It's interesting, isn't it, Mr. Pichet, that you yourself and your family are very much intimately linked with the victim. Do you not find it odd that at the highest levels of government in your country, and indeed the sordid background of both the defendant and his niece, that there is absolutely no overlap, other than the fact that you're all outraged by such a terrible act, and yet you did nothing to stop it?
Objection, Your Honour. It was his father. What could he do? He was a toddler.
Objection overruled. Give the prosecution time to make their case. Counsel, in your own time.
Thank you, Your Honour. I put to you, sir, that in all, both your father's greatness, you had no ability to stop any of this. Well, what was the point of him being leader?
What is he supposed to do? If he is a leader, is he supposed to just tell everybody, no, I will take all the decision? Or is he supposed, is the man...
Was he a leader, sir, or do we have Stefan Gerhardt, the leader of Chile? My understanding is that it was your father that was in charge. Is this not the case?
But he was the leader in terms
Was
of...
he in charge, sir?
Objection, badgering.
I feel like I'm being interrupted.
Objection overruled. Proceed.
Thank you. So he was the leader. He wanted to provide oversight. Is he supposed to tell everybody what to do and take over all the decision? Or does a good leader trust the people he surrounds himself with? He trusted Stefan, and unfortunately, Stefan was he had linked with the Joseph the Anglo Muerte. And he had his own idea, and no es creíble. I've had to put up with this for years, for telling people about the real Pinochet, the man who believed in all of this.
The court reminds the witness of the need for relevancy.
The court would like to thank the witnesses for their testimony, and I'll provide the court's opinion of the evidence presented. In terms of the science which has been presented, we've heard from the prosecution that the timeline of the death is not consistent with the natural course of hemifacial microsomia, and the court can confirm that that is indeed the case, that one would expect hemifacial microsomia to progress over the course of years, not hours or minutes. The defense, in contrast to that, has brought forward a witness from the US Biological Weapons Department who didn't directly contradict that statement, but did express that hemifacial microsomia is a very rare disease, which is also true, and that more research needs to be done to understand its full biology. In terms of motive, the prosecution alleges that the defendant was seeking to cover up Doria's knowledge of illegal human experiments and was threatening to expose the defendant's experiments, though I did not observe any concrete evidence presented indicating that these experiments had happened. However, the prosecution did demonstrate that the defendant had links to undertake bioterrorism and had interacted with various dictators in the past. The defense established that Doria was related to the defendant and that the defendant has a family history of hemifacial microsomia, making it plausible that Doria carried the disease as well. The prosecution will now deliver their final statement.
Thank you, my lord. Thank you, members of the jury. Thank you for enduring such a trial for our defendant this evening. First of all, I would like to offer my condolences to the defendant, Lord Fabio De Sio. It must be absolutely heartbreaking to lose a family member. Perhaps a family member not known of long, but a family member nevertheless. And I'm deeply sorry to hear this. But amongst all these vagaries, amongst all of this evidence, or lack of evidence, shall I even say, what we have seen this evening is a display from the defense, the rolling in of sons of dictators, world-renowned bioweapon experts, somewhat relevant witnesses, all in the name of saving the grace of a lord. I will simply say, we have shown clear evidence that it is possible to create bioweapons. We have had the scientific testimony of Professor Bowser telling us in great depth how we can deliver these very, very, and I shall say very deadly weapons. We have heard and seen how it is possible to hide such capabilities. And yet, Lord De Sio is hiding behind a fake persona of being unable to hurt a goldfish. That, to me and to all of us in this court, is clearly and utterly impossible to define as evidence of innocence. Quite the opposite. We have heard from DCS Roseblade telling us about the case, the evidence, the fact that Lord De Sio was unable to display any emotions on the scene, and yet today display complete flamboyance in a court of law. Very difficult to reconcile, isn't it? We have seen clear evidence that the defendant was clearly demonstrated in close proximity of world leaders that have been known for less than, let's say, important or relevant, or shall I dare say, good. The defendant tells us that it is impossible to demonstrate his guilt. And I put it to the court and I put it to the jury that we have demonstrated the guilt of the defendant. We have demonstrated in his own words, and I quote, "I have the knowledge to do it." And I repeat, the defendant has clearly said to all of us this evening, "I have the knowledge to do it." Now, if that wasn't sufficient, his mother herself clearly stated, answering the question, "Can your son be a murderer?" Single word answer, yes. This, I'm sure you will agree with me, is absolute, clear and evident that the defendant is guilty. And I will simply summarize all of this by saying that the only innocence in this trial is my honorable opposite counsel's.
The court would like to call upon the defence to deliver their closing statement.
To please the court, thank you. Thank you, my lord. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honour, my defendant had nothing to prove this evening. There were no witnesses which showed my defendant did anything directly with her. All he did was share a personal, familial bond. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecution had to show the how and the why. And in both cases, they got it wrong. The how was not through a mysterious bioweapon, it was through a disease. And the why was not some motive about blackmailing, but simple tragedy. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Lord Fabio Decia was in a state of shock. He watched his own two sons die at the age of 1 from the same disease, and now his short relationship with his niece had also ended in the same tragedy. He was in a state of catatonic shock. So, ladies and gentlemen, tonight you've heard some choking words from the prosecution, the hyperbole that they've thrown out tonight. They've tried to paint my client as an evil, evil man. But ladies and gentlemen, that's not it at all. What we've learned from our evidence is that Lord Fabio Decia and the victim had come together to share in one unique grief, and that is they are the children of evil, evil men. So Doria Parry was the daughter of Stefan Gerhardt, the son of Joseph Mengele. And Lord Fabio Decia was also the son of Joseph Mengele. Everything they have ever done from this moment on would have been tarnished by those relationships. The reason that Lord Fabio wanted to keep this quiet was he knew that his peerage in the House of Lords would go. He knew his career would end. Life for him will change completely going forward because of his father. Now, he did not choose his father, he did not choose, but he did choose the life that he has now, and it's all gone. Even tonight's advertising for this thing linked him to being a Nazi. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this was not a murder, this was a tragedy outlining the evil of things that men do. A tragedy of a father losing 2 sons to an awful disease, and a tragedy of watching his niece die. A tragedy of children having to pay for the sins of their father. Can a person overcome the sins of their father? Tonight, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, tell the world, yes, yes, you can overcome the sins of your father and acquit my client. I rest, Your Honour.
Would Your Honour like to call the jury to adjourn and deliberate on the evidence?
Thank you once again, my learned colleague. To ensure the smooth running of the court and future proceedings, I would reiterate to the witnesses the expectation that they invest the time and energy in getting to the court like the rest of us and not address us from their living rooms. I'd now, as you address there, like to call an adjournment of the court for 5 minutes. As I retire to weigh the case, you, the jury, will now have the opportunity, should you so desire, to deliberate anything you've heard amongst the other jury members. And after all voting has been completed, the verdict will be announced by the jury foreman in preparation for sentencing. Court will resume upon completion of the intermission.
Your Honour, I'd just like to raise a point of order there that the jury will get to vote after your final review and evaluation of the evidence.
Sustained. Thank you, my learned colleague. Court adjourned.
Matt, perhaps you would like to grab this and do a 5-minute stand-up.
That would be reputation destroying.
I believe we should call to order. The jury should be deliberating. The court, is still active.
I call a temporary resumption of the court to clarify the point that, yes, the jury will have the opportunity to vote further to the intermission, and to encourage them, should they so desire, to discuss the preliminaries of the voting with their fellow jury members. My learned colleague, am I quite clear?
I believe you are, Your Honour.
Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen of the court. Once again, court is adjourned.
All rise for the Honourable Justice Sloyan. Please be seated.
Thank you once again, my learned colleague, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. In this final segment, we will require the assistance of yourselves as jury members to administer justice on the basis of the evidence that has been presented. The court reminds you that you are here to determine the innocence or guilt of Lord Fabio Desio in the first-degree murder of Miss Doria Paris. You must find that there is both a how and a why, and if either of these are absent in your mind, then you're obligated to say that reasonable doubt is in fact present and to render a verdict of innocence. Should both a how and a why be found, you're obligated to render a verdict of guilty. On to the summary of the evidence. Counsel Jones notably asserted in his opening statement that hemifacial microsomia is a disease of such rarity that it doesn't even exist in the victim's Chilean ethnicity, and further described his intricate links to the South American elite, Lord Desio, that is. I accept Counsel Haggard's observation that Counsel Jones employed emotive and in some measure inflammatory rhetoric to a degree that risks obfuscating the facts in his opening statement. He pointedly described the defendant as a fraud and as a mind most foul. With that being said, Counsel Haggard did little to repudiate the fact-based allegations that were there, and particularly notably, I felt, he actively acknowledged his decision not to repudiate the allegation of Lord Desio's dark paternity at the outset, nor his ties to South America's multi-layered political and scientific elite. Indeed, what I felt was a largely measured opening statement, risk lapsing into moments of rhetoric itself. Upon cross-examination by our learned prosecution counsel, it was established by the distinguished DCS Roseblade that there were no external signs of injury likely to precipitate a death of this manner. At this stage, Detective Roseblade's testimony gave me no reason to doubt his credibility as a witness, though his assertion that the death cannot possibly have been brought about by hemifacial microsomia, I must nonetheless measure against his lack of medical qualifications. Notable, however, was his provocative statement that the defendant and the victim cannot possibly have been uncle and aunt. My fear was that he veered into the realm of ad hominem attacks before somewhat correcting his course when prompted and providing concrete evidence of the heritability of the psychopathy widely ascribed to his infamous father. Counsel Sartre, I felt, was justified in steering Counsel Haggard's cross-examination back towards the tangible after what had become a heavily speculative testimony that failed to yield a great deal of substance. It was established that such a use of weaponry, if proven, would have had severe political and military ramifications. Professor Bowser then recounted her expertise as well as her personal experience with hemifacial microsomia. On the balance of evidence brought before me, I'm satisfied that her statements were accurate with regard to the unlikelihood, I beg your pardon, that the disease would have progressed with sufficient rapidity to precipitate a death of this kind. While the testimony itself again veered into the speculative, I once again applauded Counsel Sartre's emphasis on the tangible scientific evidence when prompted. Professor Borsa's scientific testimony itself, I might add, in turn provided a helpful scientific explanation of the relevant virological concepts. The methodological rigor, I thought, of both parties, while time-consuming, stood as an exemplar of a helpful testimony, leaving us in no doubt as to the biological plausibility of the virological explanation put forward. I further approved of Counsel Matoi's attempt to elucidate some of the details which Professor Borsa failed to provide to the court in her initial examination. I nonetheless felt the examination was hampered by its self-acknowledged lack of anything exceeding anecdotal witness accounts. The prosecution's cross-examination, meanwhile, succeeded in establishing that Lord Desio was one of only a handful of people capable of such a crime, a statement which was anecdotal, but nonetheless whose significance does not escape me. Counsel Matoi's walkthrough of the heredity of the defendant, while methodologically sound, was less than fundamentally impactful in its overarching bearing on the outcome of the case, outside of the admittedly salient family relationship of the defendant to the victim. The testimony of the defendant's mother, it is my considered opinion, was especially telling and further corroborated the prosecution's suggestion of the heritability of the trait, I might add, in rather strikingly emotive terms. Now, I applauded Counsel Jones's methodological rigor again in cross-examining the defendant, who gave a similarly rambling account of himself, after which I hope I'm not overstepping the mark by suggesting none of us were any the wiser. What emerged, however, from Lord Desio's testimony was overwhelmingly a picture of a man in pain, and a man caught in the teeth of a tragic history of family betrayal through no fault of his own, and that stood out to me. Counsel Jones's examination of Lord Desio, I felt, risked working to its own detriment with deliberately provocative statements, especially having regard to the defendant's emotional state. Counsel Sartre's subsequent cross-examination of Mr. Trevino attempted to cast aspersions on Lord Desio's character on the basis of his association with high-ranking figures of dubious reputation. I would nonetheless take the opportunity to remind this court that freedom of association is not and will not be treated as a punishable offence. Now, before I come on to my closing remarks, Sir Richard Peck affirmed the defendant's good character, and there was little in the ensuing cross-examination of our illustrious guest to persuade me otherwise, as he gave a glittering account both of himself and of the defendant. I'm satisfied that I'm not overstepping the boundaries of professionalism by suggesting that after Marco Pinochet's ensuing testimony, none of us were quite sure what we just heard. Further, I reiterate the Usher's observation that the preliminary accusations against the defendant of human experimentation, I beg your pardon, were without satisfactory verification. That concludes the summary of the evidence at hand, or the best approximation of it available in the time to me. And I take this opportunity once again to remind you, your duty as members of the jury is to determine whether the evidence before you proves the guilt of the defendant beyond any reasonable doubt. My learned colleague.
The foreman of the jury will now collect the jury's votes.
You should now see a Zoom poll in front of you where you can vote guilty or not guilty. We have a few moments. There's 85 people available to vote, and I'm going to wait until a good proportion of those votes are in. Quite possibly an overwhelming proportion of those votes are in, at which point I will announce the verdict of the jury. Just a few more moments. And with that, I will close the poll and I will announce the verdict of the jury is overwhelmingly not guilty. I'd also now like to launch a couple of other polls around the delivery of this event. So I'd like you to consider who was the best participant involved. So thinking about their content, their argument, and their delivery style. So who was the best participant? So we have the two prosecution lawyers, Ben and Arno. We have the judge, Ben Sloan, the defense, Alan and David. We have some witnesses, Matt, Carol, Fabio, and Jorge. We have quite a few of the votes coming in for that. So nothing like as clear cut as the vote for guilty or not guilty. It's a very, very close run thing. I'm going to give it again just a few more moments to collect the votes in. We're at 80% of the votes collected so far. A couple more moments. I'm going to end the voting, and I'm now going to share this because it really isn't a conclusive evidence. So just by a nose, I mean literally 1 point, Fabio beats David, Ben.
Sustained.
And finally, I would like I would ask for a vote on who you considered was overall the best performer in their believability, their story, and so on. So the best believable character. Oh, we have quite a different balance of votes going on here for both most believable character. We're now at 70% of the vote. To be honest, whatever I say here is going to get overruled by the judge. We're at 77%. I like just a couple more moments, and then I'll end the polling and I'll share those results. And my learned Lord Justice Sloan is the most believable performer. There is one
sustained.
There is one. I really need to highlight myself, shouldn't I? So there is one final thing that I would like to ask, and that when this event ends, you will receive a survey through Zoom that asks questions about the value of this event and so on. So it will appear once you exit the event. I would very much like you all to fill that in so that we can learn from this event and see how to improve that in future. I will also post a link to a feedback form within the chat, so you can go, if you don't get the link, the link that I've just posted is the exact same questions but in Google Forms, and so I'd ask you to fill those in so that we can learn from this, we can get some feedback from this, and perhaps do another one. Well, that's me with my Zoom hat, my foreman of the jury hat on, and any I would like to hand back to, but for the moment I'm going to hand back to the winner of the most convincing person, Ben Sloan.
Thank you once again, my learned colleague. Lord Fabio Desio, you may remain seated for the time being. The foreman of the jury has delivered his verdict, and I am compelled as the justice of this court to acquit you of the charges brought against you by the prosecution. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we heard today a case, I beg your pardon, brought against Lord Desio that he was a killer, a war criminal, and a terrorist, a man who would disregard the sanctity of life. But I ask you this, prosecution counsel, what about the sanctity of his life? His life, which has been irreparably tarnished by the allegations brought against him today. The opprobrious label of murderer, so senselessly applied to him, will live on as an indelible spectre overshadowing his upstanding character, an ineradicable phantasm which will continue to haunt him in both his personal and his professional life long after this trial has run its course. For that grievous injustice, Lord Desio, I, in Her Majesty's Prosecution Service, issue an apology of the highest conceivable magnitude. Jury members, my learned colleagues, my learned friends, on the 23rd of March 2016, Lord Fabio Desio welcomed Miss Doria Paris into his home. Miss Paris was later that evening to succumb to a rare and deadly hereditary disease. Lord Desio was arrested at the scene, ostensibly based on little more than his chance proximity to the decedent. The suggestion was raised by the prosecution that the defendant's contacts with whom he was pictured implied war crimes of the kind attributed to his associates. I therefore take the opportunity to remind the prosecution that freedom of association is not a crime, and neither is hearsay an acceptable basis on which to convict an innocent man. Similarly, I reject in its totality the notion that Lord Desio's paternity is remotely material to the outcome of this case. The exigencies placed upon the defendant in the course of this trial were made all the more egregious by the allegations that his actions amounted to terrorism, all the more preposterous by the suggestion that a classified biological weapon was used in the process, and all the more hurtful by the senseless calling into question of the defendant's paternity. I consider it an indictment of our great British justice system that a full-length trial was necessary in order to falsify these claims. An innocent woman has lost her life, and for that tragedy, the world will be irredeemably smaller. But today, I condemn our prosecution counsel for compounding that very gravest of tragedies by attempting to take another innocent life with her. Prosecution, your case amounting as it did to little more than a smear campaign against the distinguished Lord CEO, evidenced a contempt for his illustrious heredity, equaled only by your contempt for the course of justice itself. The only redeeming feature of your case has been your unequivocal failure to persuade the court that your arguments had any legal standing. The court asked the defendant to please stand. As presiding justice of the court, it is my duty as well as my sincerest pleasure to inform the court that there is no case to answer for, and accordingly, Lord DeCio, you are free to go. Case dismissed.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
My learned colleague, again, I hand over to you to wrap up the proceedings.
Could I suggest maybe Guy would like to say a few closing words?
Sustained.
Yeah. Wow, thank you so much, everybody who's been part of this. I'm completely awestruck and overwhelmed, and frankly slightly depressed actually, because I've never been in the company of such intelligent people. But now we have our general evaluation, and this will be provided by none other than the Reverend Sue Coleman, who is the High Sheriff of Hampshire. And she has a role which involves her visiting prisons and courts and all sorts of things. She could much better explain what she does. But I'll just say one other thing. We do have another High Sheriff of Hampshire in the audience, which I vaguely mentioned earlier. So they're like London buses. You know, you wait all the time and nothing turns up, and then suddenly two of them turn up. But I'd like to welcome now Sue Coleman to give her general evaluation.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, everybody. That was an absolutely stunning event. I have to say, I feel a little bit peaked. You have to know this outfit I'm wearing, I'm not sure how much you can see, is quite something, but I feel totally outdone by what everybody else was wearing. I think I particularly want to mention...
Excuse me, Sue. Could I suggest you turn off your virtual background because you've disappeared? All right, okay, you come back.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Right, okay, you had disappeared. Please carry on.
Yeah, I was wondering where I'd gone, and I just thought I'd done something very strange. Yeah, I wanted to mention, oh, it's because I lean back when I'm talking. That's what it is. See, these things that you need to learn when you're doing Zoom conversations. Justice, His Honour Justice Soyen's outfit, that wig is quite something. I think I have met judges who would probably kill for a wig like that, far more flamboyant than they would normally wear in court. And the sort of gentle frosting on his facial hair was very impressive. It also feels quite odd speaking now after being immersed in such a drama, to almost come out of the drama to say something in the real world. But I've been asked to say a little bit about what high sheriffs do, and the easiest way to describe it possibly is the promise that I made when I was sworn in just under a year ago. We do a year in office And so Mary Montague, who was also here, was High Sheriff, I think 3 years ago, and I finished my tenure on the 24th of March. But this promise says this: I will truly and faithfully support the judiciary and all who maintain the Queen's peace, who administer justice, and who protect and support their fellow citizens. And effectively, this means engaging in supportive relationships with our police, with probation, as Guy's mentioned, visiting our prisons, our emergency services, building relationships with magistrates, with judges. Normally, if it weren't a COVID year, lots of entertaining of circuit judges who are away from home, and looking after the court staff, who I've discovered respond very well to homemade cakes and brownies. Much of this work is behind the scenes and hidden, but there is normally in a non-COVID year lots of opportunities for public speaking. We get asked to present awards, to declare things open, to encourage the troops, as it were. And so even with all the restrictions, I found myself addressing large cohorts of police cadets, cutting a ribbon to open a garden within our prison, and present awards to people. And I have to say, many High Sheriffs come into this role having never or rarely done any public speaking. I suspect there are lots of very anxious High Sheriffs, and thankfully around public speaking there is training that is given. But for myself, you might be able to see I've integrated a dog collar with my amazing ruffle, because I'm also a church minister. So at least I've had some experience, but I can empathise through having to learn to do public speaking. With those of you who are part of Toastmasters, for me, it was an agonising process to gain confidence and to find my voice in public speaking. I suppose the other bit of public speaking with High Sheriffs is that I was very much told, always have a speech in your back pocket, because you will often be asked to give impromptu speeches. And I have to say, improvising speeches is one of my, nightmares probably. And so being evaluator this evening, I can't have a speech in my back pocket. And instead I've watched, I'm not quite sure how much was improvised and how much was written, but I think a lot was improvised this evening. And I am absolutely in awe of that improvisation. So here I go, I will try and do some improvising evaluation, and I suspect I'll get a little note afterwards saying you probably should come and join Toastmasters to learn to do it better. So first of all, a little reflection on the authenticity of the court process. It was so impressive, the way that the solemnity of the occasion was given by the attitude of, particularly at the beginning, the judge and the usher. It's been a really good snapshot of the process, that kind of rhythm of conversations, the kind of audacious interruptions, the judge presiding and restoring order. That was very good. I was a little puzzled by the voice of the court usher, because in the cases I've sat in on, the usher doesn't really get to say very much other than kind of nods to the judge and helping the process going on. Gosh. The performances were so impressive. I've got some sort of, I suppose I would say, snapshots of things that were brilliant, but I made a note, I did make a note of things that I thought overall with everybody were amazing. I thought the inhabiting of roles, the characterizations were absolutely brilliant, and people kept within those characterizations. The use of very good descriptive language, gripping language that had been some presumably written, but much improvised, superb. The use of gestures. There was a lovely moment when Fabio just took his glasses off. There were moments when people, as it were, leant into the camera to make points, as I've watched kind of barristers do as they turn to juries and lean towards them. The use of gestures. Very good moments of humour. I'm glad the goldfish got mentioned. I loved that bit. to base somebody's innocence on how they treat a goldfish. That was a marvellous moment of humour. I'm just looking back now at some of my notes on different people. Councillor Barrister Jones. I have seen barristers who have that sort of slightly, what can you say, pompous and formal way of being in the court, and I thought that Barrister Jones did an absolutely brilliant job of presenting that sort of barrister that takes it all very seriously and is a bit full of themselves, and they kind of know what they're doing. And then I loved the kind of defence, a kind of more natural manner, very approachable to the jury. I thought that Detective Constable Roseblade, again, that kind of, with his tweed jacket and just very pragmatic approach was brilliant. Oh, and I tell you, I thought Carol Bowser as the expert witness was so convincing, very powerful, very succinct, very clear, with those great bursts of kind of authentic frustration. I thought she was brilliant. I liked Councillor Matto and his, I'm not sure if he was New Zealand or Australian, but there was a lovely kind of laid back way of doing his role. Madame Maddie Dupuy, brilliant, and I loved the comment about her being rather young to be the mother of the defendant. Just so many things. George Trevino, if I have that pronounced right, and Lord Fabio, just both fantastic actors that were so convincing. And Richard Peck, quite rightly, as our global expert, not surprisingly, an impeccable witness. And I wanted to say about George Trevino, one of the comments that you, well, in conversations that I have with judges in break times, has been around whether somebody is a credible witness. And George Trevino was a really credible witness, I thought. And then the summing ups. Just thinking that normally judges and barristers get time to put their arguments together. There's nice little recesses and they can go and formulate what they're going to say. And so to do all that this evening, just to use language so well, was deeply impressive. I've been asked to identify parts when I think that the participants could have done better, and I know that constructive criticism is so important, but I'm not sure I've got much constructive criticism, to be honest. I think the bits that were difficult, and that was part of Zoom, is when what people were saying overlapped, and so you couldn't really hear and it got a little bit chaotic. But I think I want to blame Zoom for that rather than those who were acting. And I think just the sense that each participant through this amazing construction has just done something new to, I assume, all of you or most of you. It was just superb. I've been asked to conclude my thoughts, which I'll do now, just reflecting a little bit on how the skills of Toastmasters could indeed benefit our UK prisons, and beginning with HMP Winchester, that I am passionate about seeing the men there being enabled to move back into society and to be rehabilitated, to live worthwhile lives. So I think probably what I want to talk about is the power of finding your voice. As I've mentioned, I've had to do this myself, and to do that has been a long and quite terrifying journey. And yet what I've discovered and what I've seen in others, because I now help look after trainee priests at a theological college, that something extraordinary happens when people find their voice. There is something very powerful and very therapeutic, and I would even say as much life-changing, when women and men can address their fears of public speaking, and something over and above what the skill of public speaking is happens, and you see an extraordinary change. I wanted to mention that I spent a small time witnessing and being part of a voice therapy group that was helping people find their voice. And they did that through some extraordinary means and exercises, not just using words, but using gestures and groans and shouts, finding words then to express the noises that were coming out, what had been going on for them. And again, seeing people transformed by that process. And all of that, I suppose, leads me to say that to see the wisdom that has been learnt by Toastmasters over the years being brought to men incarcerated in our prisons really excites me. That I think those men will find their true voices in a very significant way. And I say that partly informed by having worked with, in different settings with ex-offenders over many years. And what one often meets is an external bravado, but every man and woman I've worked with, I would say, has appalling self-esteem. Many of them lack true confidence in a world that's outside of what is so often their limited experiences. They're terrified of job interviews, of interacting with people who are different. And I don't want to sound too airy-fairy, but despite some of these characters have been very broken and very abusive, I hold a very deep belief that each and every person on this planet is precious, and that enabling a person to find their true inner voice, that one that's so often hidden under layers of accumulated debris, to find that voice can be life transforming. I want to end by telling you about a man who had a huge effect on me when I had just been trained as a curate. I was a brand new minister out of college. I was trained by a man who had experienced a life of homelessness as a teenager, and then he ended up in prison before going into the army. He then came to faith, and he found his vocation as a priest. So it's pretty amazing, from ex-offender to priesthood. And a number of years ago, 5 years ago, he ended up preaching at a service in Winchester Cathedral, not a stone's throw from Winchester Prison. It's a service, it's called Law Sunday, where we celebrate justice. It's a service that high sheriffs have a responsibility for. And I will never forget this man walking up the high steps to the pulpit, looking down on the magistrates, the police, the judges, and he began his sermon by addressing the judges. "Your Honours," he said, "the last time I stood in front of people like yourselves, you sent me down." You could have heard a pin drop. This erudite, dignified man had once been a prisoner. And I would say he is someone who has found his voice. He's someone who can articulate his whole story, from the difficulties of his early life through huge restoration to what he is doing now. And I don't know the statistics. I don't know whether there are any yet on whether public speaking reduces offending. It sounds like the outcomes in America are starting to prove that it does. I, for one, would be really surprised if it doesn't. And I want to end by saying, I hope that your project in Winchester Prison is a great success, and it begins to be replicated all over our prison system to give men and women a voice, a confidence, and a restoration to enable them to stop offending. Thank you so much for listening to me.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thank you so much, Sue. That was a moving and incredibly powerful evaluation and became an amazing sermon as well. You're a natural, clearly a natural. Although I can't say that Toastmaster members are all sort of convicts, but we certainly all experience a life-changing process when we go through, many of us, most of us, through Toastmasters. So I can see a parallel, and we certainly can understand how that can benefit the prisons. So I wonder, unfortunately, Richard Peck had to go to another meeting. So I don't know if you know, he's on a world tour at the moment. So he came from a meeting beforehand, did our meeting, then he's got to go and do another meeting. But hopefully he'll be able to give us an evaluation by video. So that'd be quite interesting to see what he thought. But I thought his performance was absolutely stunning, as well as everybody else's. I would think it'd be really useful to know whether Fabio actually was innocent or guilty. I'm a little bit concerned because I thought anybody who would walk into a court with their hat on and the only reason they take it off is to do their hair shows a certain disregard for justice. Fabio, do you fancy just telling us whether you actually were guilty or innocent?
That was my style. So as a Lord, you have a style that you always, I have respect myself. So for me, I know that they told me, Fabio, Lord Desio, don't wear the hat in the court. But I say, no, I will wear because it's my style. So if it's my style, I will respect. And I am innocent.
Thank you, Fabio. I still don't believe you, but there you go.
Look at what my niece gave me. This is my niece gift. So why I should kill my niece? I love her. You don't believe me?
All right, I believe you now. You convinced me. Thank you so much for everything. So we won't carry this meeting on for too long, but I'd like to pass you on actually to Benjamin Jones, who's the architect of this particular event. And when he first said he wanted to do it, I think it sounded like a good idea. This is going to be a great little Hamwic meeting, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he sent the briefing notes, 50 pages of briefing notes. And that was, I think that was after I'd asked Sue Coleman to be involved. So she was sort of tied in as well. And I think Richard Peck was a bit scared by it. But looking at it, you really did need that much information. It was so deep, it ran so deep. And it's just so impressive. But one thing I want to say quickly is I forgot to thank Hallmark speakers, because they were involved as well. And there are just a few of these other impromptu speakers, Simon Hassad and Adrian Gill, who is performing the role of the timer, Richard Blackman, Kit, who's our Zoom master this evening. I'd like to thank all of you lot. Stephanie Walker as well. So apart from the obvious stars who fit the bill, the top bill here, I'm so grateful for everybody else. Now, Benjamin, would you like to close this meeting by just giving us maybe a few minutes on what you went through to come up with this whole thing? What was your thinking process? Where have you come from to create this madness?
Oh, thank you, President Guy, and thank you, audience and obviously participants. It takes a little bit of thought process behind these things, as you probably gleaned from all the documents I set out, and as I ruined some 3 to 4 weeks of your life, and I appreciate you enduring those. I think the main thing is that you take inspiration from around you. Obviously, you've got popular culture, how it comes together, and obviously the people, the characters that you come across in life, they inspire you, or indeed, there's lots of inspiration from both good and bad. I think for me, I was trying to find a medium with which to explore some of the genetics and genomics in our world. And I thought, what a great time to do this, right? We're all kind of like locked down in various means and forms. Let's just get the conversation speaking about the genomics. Well, why not weave this into a trial? Why not do this with advanced, it's speaking at pace and doing this all together at, I have to say, it was quite a pace, and trying to keep on top of it was a real challenge. I don't want to take up too much people's time because I appreciate the time is quite late. But I think for me, I just want to say a big thank you for all of my functionaries. You delivered yourselves admirably from every conceivable angle. I couldn't say thank you more to a greater team. To all those participants who helped us beside, thank you so much. For all of the dignitaries that arrived, Sue, Mr. Pecker who's here, and everybody who's contributed, I just thank you, because reality is that something like this doesn't come together by one person. It comes together because everyone, when I phoned them or spoke to them or hassled them online and said, please, can you do this role? They said yes. They said yes, and they stuck to the guns, and they really delivered. I mean, it should be worth noting that Justice Sloyan there found out in 96 hours before his role that I needed him to drop everything he was doing and help me. He did. And that could be said probably for every single person in front of your screen right now. There is not a single person here who didn't have a lot of heavy lifting. David, our usher, if you saw how much his legs were pedaling behind the scenes, you wouldn't believe it. Unbelievable. And Kit is our IT guru. These things don't come together by chance. They come together by sometimes just brute force will, but because the vision worked. And that is what mattered, ladies and gentlemen. And on that note, I think I shall pass briefly to our district director. I believe he would like to say a few words before we close up.
Thank you, Benjamin. And I will simply say thank you to Hamwic speakers. Thank you for a tremendous job. It's been an incredible journey from hearing the event about to happen way back in December, if I remember correctly, when I first heard about this event being planned, all the way to a few weeks ago when I was asked to participate, and by saying yes, only to then realize those 50 pages coming my way. This was an absolutely amazing journey. And despite a lot of the preparation and hard work from the entire team behind the scene in front of the screen, the journey that everybody took is simply admirable. From the vision of a club president to allow these activities to occur, to create the environment to make it happen, to Benjamin creating those scripts, those backstories. And for those of you in the audience, you've only seen maybe, I would say, at best 10% of some of the backstories of many of the characters. Some of those were even created in the last few days so that we can come up with these scenarios. And I just cannot be more grateful to you, Benjamin, for creating what has most definitely been the first time this club has done such an event, the first time I have seen this in our district, and I wouldn't be surprised if it was the first time such an event occurred anywhere around the world. And judging by the comments on the chat, I think that will resonate with many, if not all, the attendants this evening. So thank you, Hamwic speakers. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, everyone behind the scene in front of the screen for everything you've done. This has certainly been a wonderful Toastmasters showcase.
Thank you, Arnold. Thank you so much. Okay, well, pretty much going to close the meeting now, but maybe keep your eyes open for some more weird and wacky events from Hamwic, or please, if you're in a club and you fancy doing some yourself, do. I've got an idea up my sleeve. It's going to be called Wedding Chaos. That's the next one. See you next time. Event closed.